Good morning. You're on Ottawa Designers with one of our local real estate gurus, Fady Khudair, who is part of the Sutton Group and the Khudair Real Estate Group as well. Why did you choose real estate?
You know what? It's first off, thank you so much, Sandria, for having me. It's a pleasure to be talking to someone that's as good as you are with what you do. I see a lot of your good work around the city. And this one of the reasons why I had brought you on my podcast. Essentially, is that every time I run into something beautiful, I'm like, oh, who did this? Sandria. Of
Sharing.
course, of course. The reason why I got into real estate actually is quite simple. Very, very simple. It's very near and dear to my heart. Where I come from, I came from Gaza, if you're aware of what the situation is.
Terrible.
It's definitely a real estate grab. That what's going on. It's ethnic cleansing with a lot of other things. But the main reason really I got into it is that I can help people get into their homes or get into their business of their choosing without necessarily having any sort of pitfalls or any issues. And more importantly, without losing that shirt off their back because they've made a bad mistake or something like that.
Do you feel that having your podcast has also helped enlighten people about the market, about choosing a realtor, things like that?
It is and it's not. It's kind of a dual purpose there. The podcast really, the biggest reason that I have it is just so I can actually shed some light on the city, especially when you're doing commercial real estate. You really want to be in the know of what's going on in the city, what businesses are out there. So we've had multiple businesses. Like I've had for example, the Canada BIA. I've had yourself on the podcast. I've had folks that are running, multi-million-dollar companies, small businesses and big businesses that are around the city that shape this beautiful city that we call Ottawa.
I love it. We're kind of on the same field when it comes to our podcast, where we want to bring people into the know that they haven't had the same, audience, things like that. And it really
Hmm.
shows the city in its best light by having people like us bringing others that we recommend, that we've seen doing amazing work. And I love that about you. I loved being on your show. I think you're a fabulous interviewer and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I
So
appreciate it. It's the biggest thing for me was like a lot of people that they have that phrase that Ottawa is boring, when really all I want to do is tell them, hey, maybe you should just look at the mirror.
okay.
Ottawa is not boring. There's so much stuff to do. There's so many businesses out there. There's so many good people that are contributing to this beautiful city that we call home.
Big time.
And definitely it's not boring. It is boring if you want it to be, but
Yeah.
it's extremely exciting if you know what to do and where to look for
And there's a lot of money in Ottawa that
it. Hmm.
tap to make other money, and people need to know that. And real estate is one of them, which I tell people all the time. You have money within your house that you don't even know you have. Use it instead of just letting it sit there. Reinvest, do things like that. Could you tell the
Yeah.
between the different real estate transactions that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought this up. So my business is kind of 50-50. I do some commercial real estate, which encompasses a ton of leasing, finding new businesses for folks, selling and buying businesses. For example, I'm selling a cannabis shop as we speak. For anyone that's looking, it's a great, great opportunity to get into, especially now that the city's not making any new license. Also, for example, like multi-units, mixed use, where there's obviously the residential upstairs, maybe the commercial downstairs. So multiple avenues of commercial, and it's vast. But then also the residential, which is extremely important, and that's what's near and dear to our heart, which is basically dealing with people's homes. That's where you lay down at night, and then and you want to make sure that your home is safe and it's in a good neighborhood, and definitely something that you can continue to grow within. And for that, that's what we do. Residential real estate, and we find it's a quite the interesting mix between the two. You've got the commercial that's purely numbers, purely driven by what's in it for me, kind of a business, where the residential, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of emotions that go into it. And it's kind of interesting, actually, especially when we're on the selling side. One of the things that I always pride myself on to telling sellers is that let's find a way to make your home lovable. Let's find a way to, when we present it in such a light, it brings emotions into the buyer. emotion is what really is going to sell when it comes to residential real estate, because you tied in, this is your home, this is your family, right? Like you want to make sure that you're definitely in a good spot.
And the psychology of the purchase is a big one. And that's something that I think defines whether you're a good realtor or not. Knowing, there's other things you can do to your home. It might not be perfect because the paint color is in that way or a wall is in the way. But depending on the budget you have, a good realtor
Exactly.
and the client's mind. Are there certain areas in Ottawa that you would define as like the new hot spots or outside of Ottawa, but still somewhat in the surroundings?
Right now, Findlay Creek seems to be really one of the areas that's on the up and up, Riverside South. And it's really because of the expansion in Ottawa. It's quite simple, right? Like when you look at the boundaries, we have on the north side, we have the river, and not much you can do there. Like you're not going to be building in the river. Sorry, we're not Dubai here. But then on the right side, which is
That.
the obviously the south, that's where the expansion is happening. So you'll find the prices in Findlay Creek are a little bit hotter than normal, Manotick as well too, because it's all going south. Just if you look at the map, it's really just simple. This is the river, and it's all going towards the south. So there's a lot more in Barrhaven, Findlay Creek, Manotick. Those areas are becoming more and more the mainstream. In fact, we've been kind of debating this, and on the commercial side, a lot of folks have been saying that Barrhaven is going to tend to be the new downtown.
Yep.
I'll give you an example. You go to Barrhaven right now, right after, just around lunch, it's rush hour, it's mayhem, right?
Big.
Because a lot of people are working from home. The advent of going to the office is no longer there. It's, the government is only doing what, 3 days a week, maybe 2 days if you're lucky. So everything is just kind of shifting southwest
Agreed.
because of that.
And it's funny because I grew up in Manotick and it used to be Hicksville. People would say, "Oh my God, you live in Manotick, it's so far." And then now
Yeah.
that the bridge has connected Riverside South, Findlay Creek area with Barrhaven, it's just made an accessibility that is fabulous as far as business.
But you got to be careful there, Sandra. You cannot call Riverside South Manatee, because otherwise the Manatee people will completely
I
lose it,
know
right?
the Earl Armstrong that separates Riverside South and Manotick.
Correct, correct. And
And
that's the big deal as well, too, because Manatee is a lot of old money, right? It's been
yeah,
around for quite some time. There's a lot of farms, and a lot of those farms, like they're massive, 100-acre farms, 200-acre farms. They're now turning into a lot more residential. And, that house that used to be a couple of 100,000 10 years ago, now it's worth probably 2 million,
exactly.
just because of the expansion that's going that way.
Incredible. It's incredible. So who would be your ideal client and why?
That's a fantastic question, and it really did. I'd have to kind of split it, right? You've got the commercial side and the residential side. On the commercial side, ideally, any business that's trying to set up, whether it's they're setting up shop, like the coffee shop, the uh, designer, anything like that, that's looking at setting up shop and looking at a place to call home for their office, or retail or what have you. So the commercial is a little bit vast. But on the residential, that's really where we have a bit of a niche, and we kind of hone in on the new immigrants, new Canadians that are coming in Ottawa, and they're looking at their first time home buyer. So a ton of first time home buyers that we deal with based on that, because it does require a lot of education and a lot of sort of you taking your time trying to explain everything from start to end. In fact, because we've been doing this quite often, my team and I developed something called the Academy, which is basically a new thing that we have in the city. You won't see any other agent in the city doing this. And the reason being is because it takes a lot of learning and teaching into getting someone, especially if you're looking at a first-time home buyer. I'd like to get them from zero knowledge to knowing everything, even if they don't end up doing any transactions with us. Like I said, the biggest reason I got into real estate is because I lost my home. And
Wow,
I'm never going to allow anybody to lose their home. That's the whole reason why I do this.
that's amazing. That's really actually leading to my next question is, do you have advice for someone who's looking and they're scared, they've been renting forever and now they want to buy a house? What would you give them as three pieces of advice to start setting up, planning to buy that new home?
Oh gosh, where do I start? It really all depends. But it depends on their level of comfort as far as what they know about the buying process. The biggest thing I would say is just let's talk about your financial. Let's just see where you at with your financials, right? That's going to give you an indication of, can I do this? Is it healthy? Is this something that I can, take on? For example, like you sit down and you calculate all your expenses, all your income, and you figure that out. And normally, like if you're looking at today's sort of mortgage pricing, it's roughly about 4 times, 4.5 times of what you make, 4.2, depending on how aggressive that lender can be of your income, right? So whatever that income is 4.2 is what you can qualify for in a way. But don't quote me on it, because again, that depends also on your credit. It depends on what sort of credit availability do you have, if you have any car payments, things like that. So that's the first step. Get your financials, get your SHIT in order when it
Yeah.
comes to that. Once you get the financials in order, then maybe possibly go and talk to a bank. I would recommend highly not to talk to a bank, actually, maybe talk to a mortgage broker. And the difference between the two, not that I'm bank hating or anything like that, but it's really at the end of the day, that bank is like a box.
Yeah.
If you don't fit within that box, they're going to throw you out just because your arm doesn't fit. A mortgage broker is a little bit different. They're actually, they'll take their time. They've got about 30 plus lenders that they deal with. So essentially, what they're looking for is something that's going to fit you and your family properly. So get that second step, which is getting the pre-approval. Then you go and interview realtors. I highly recommend. I mean, you can do it on your own. Don't get me wrong, but this is the biggest purchase of your life. I highly recommend that you go and hire somebody. It doesn't have to be myself. In fact, if you're a first-time home buyer, I'll probably get you to one of my team. I won't be serving you myself. But the reason why I say that, because this is where you can go wrong. That realtor can make or break the deal for you. And this is where you want to interview at least 2 or 3. Although it's absolutely free for you as a buyer, I want to say like 99.9% of the time you don't pay for it. But where you're going to find the difference is, are they going to put you in front of their needs? Are they going to be the one, do they have proper knowledge with the area? Ask them questions. Ask a lot of questions. This is your time to shine. Interview like your life depends on it, because it really does. It's your home at the end of the day, right? Once you hire a realtor, then you're going to start going out and looking. And if you really want to know more about this, I'd love for you guys to jump on my academy. Just hit me up. I'm available on all socials. I'll give you the link. I'll give you free access for it, and you can take a look at all of my courses there and learn more. Because at the end of the day, like, my job, the reason why I got into this, like as I said, is because I don't want anyone to lose their home. And
That's
if that means you're buying with someone else, that's totally fine, because it's not really about me making the money. It's about you keeping that roof over your head.
I think that makes a huge difference in who you're selecting. Someone that, yes, is hungry to be there and to do the job because they love the job and they're passionate, but someone that has had a personal experience with not enough knowledge, perhaps,
Mhm.
has had an error and doesn't want someone else to do the same thing. What are common mistakes that people make in hiring the wrong realtor? And how do people select the correct one for their needs?
That's a fantastic question. It really all depends on a bunch of things. One is values. Do our values align? And ask questions like, what do you normally service? What type of clients do you service? What area are you in? Knowledge is very, very important when it comes to real estate, because if that realtor, for example, doesn't know the area as well, it's definitely something that you're going to be paying for it. I'll give you an example. If I don't do a lot of business in Findlay Creek and you ask me to buy something in Findlay Creek, I might not be servicing you properly. Not that I don't do any business in Findlay Creek, but just as an example. I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly what your house is worth, even if I've done the comparables and all of that. Or I might, but I also might not know what's coming down the pipe, right? Like a lot of the times we know we have a lot of relationship with the city. We have a lot of relationship with counselors on the city. We're able to tell you that, there's a pipeline coming in here, or there is going to be a new mall coming in here, or they're just building, the railways coming in here, for example, with
Yeah.
the train. So knowing the right realtor is definitely going to help you when it comes to knowing the area. The values have to align, and take a look at the reviews. It's very, very important to take a look at their, Google reviews, or their Instagram or anything like that, because it's going to tell you a lot of their past, what they've done. Ask some questions about, what type of transactions do they do. It's also very, very important. I would look at this, honest to God, I would look at this as if I'm interviewing the new realtor for a job.
Yeah.
And that's really it, because at the end of the day, it's a job. It's my job to get you the house.
Yeah.
And sometimes I might not be the right fit. In fact, I would say about 30%, 40% of our people that we meet, we don't end up doing business with, because we're not the right fit.
So I feel that you, well, actually, I know from personal experience that you also do mentoring because I contacted you with my son when he was interested in potentially seeing if this was a field he was into. And you told me that you do, group sessions on Mondays with your team and you do all this. Is mentoring very important to you? Does that touch your heart? Is it something that you're going to
It's
do with?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. It's to me, it's like it's always about what you leave behind, right? Mentoring is a massive, massive part of my life, and the reason being, and it was like that as well too with other jobs. Like I've been in sales for 20 plus years, 25 years or so. So it's always been a big part, and the reason being is because I'm a huge believer in giving somebody the knowledge and the skills to go out and fish. Don't fish for them. You're not going to be there and just like I'm not going to be there forever to keep giving you leads or to keep giving you clients. It's just not going to happen. But what's going to happen is if I show you how to do it, even if you fumble it for the first 10, 15 times, you're going to learn. And then from there, you can grow and go on and go on. One thing that I was taught is that, you see it, you learn it, you do it, and then you do too many. You do one, you see one, you do one, you do too many. Simple as that. Once you see one, great. I know now how the transaction works. Thank you so much for helping me. Okay, now I'm gonna do one, and I'm gonna fumble, and I'm gonna fall, and I'm gonna make mistakes, and that's okay because mistakes are learning. Once I've done that, then now I can do many. And one thing about sales in general, like, and because of it, I interviewed so many businesses on my podcast. You get this sort of feeling that they all have that issue with sales. Sales is a big thing, right? You cannot really have a business and call it a business unless a sale is made. If
Yep.
you don't make a sale, and you know this better than anyone. I mean, if you don't sell someone on that design or that reno or whatever that you guys are doing,
Yep.
it's just not going to happen. Like you're not going to learn anything. You're not in business. It's more of an expensive hobby, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there is something called that. I'm not sure who is the author. Actually, I've read this book called Crossing the Chasm. Very, very well thought of in when it comes to high tech, when it comes to software, where essentially you don't cross the chasm. The chasm is being this massive sort of gap. It's from one side of the river to the other. You don't really cross that until you're able to sell 10 customers. And the reason why it's 10 because you have those cannot be your friends or family or whatever. You've had to have repeated that same process 10 times. When you repeated it 10 times, you've now sort of crossed the chasm. You've known exactly what it takes to have a successful transaction. And now you're able to go back and, dig into that experience that you've had and say, this is what I did wrong. This is what I'm going to do different. Oh, yeah, no, I shouldn't have done that. And then learn from it. Once you do 10, that's when you cross the chasm and now you have a business.
Absolutely. And then it gives you referrals and it leads to other clients. And it's not just
Exactly.
trying to get it, you're actually word of mouth is spreading itself in all sorts of directions that it was never spreading before. What makes
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
team different than other teams in Ottawa?
That's a fantastic question. We pride ourselves on being patient with the client. So the biggest thing is like, sometimes one thing I've learned in sales is that sometimes you have to go back a couple of steps to go forward massive leaps and bounds, right? It's like, just think of it as kind of pulling the arrow. The arrow has to be pulled so far in order for you to just get it to the target. So what that means for us is that, sometimes we have to actually push the brakes on the client and say, hey, no, 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 you're doing a mistake. Let's just go back a little bit. Let's teach you, show you exactly what you need to do to make this happen. So if that means you got to go back and get a pre-approval, or if that means that we just got to go through the buying process with you one more time, whatever that is, we're going to take our time and patience and kind of go through there. More important than anything is integrity above all when it comes to real estate. And this is why, like, you got to choose someone with the same values, right? Like, the whole reason I got into this, I was doing perfectly fine in software, and I can go back to software any day I want. Once you learn that sales skill, you cannot take it away, right? So you can sell anything essentially, but it's not about the sale. It's about making sure that that client is getting the best value for their money. And if that means, obviously, you got to put them first,
Yeah,
right? If that means you got to go back a couple of steps to just make sure that you're all on the same page, then it's fantastic. You're moving forward. The other big thing for us is setting up the right expectations. And I know this from some mistakes that I've made myself as well too, as a realtor. In fact, if you take a look at my Google review, I have one bad Google review, and that haunted me for quite some time, because to me, what did I do wrong? And I had to go back and learn from it. And I sat down with the client, and I haven't responded yet, but I've sat down with the client and I've talked to them. We've resolved it, obviously. And but what it was setting the wrong expectations. You
Yeah.
know, we
That
were not on the same page in terms of expectations. One big thing that I've learned as well too, when it comes to expectations, expectations can never be met unless both parties know exactly what they're expecting from the other person. Once
transparency.
you know that, exactly. And a lot of like a lot of times it's easier to actually ask, are we on the same page?
Yeah.
That's exactly what's going to happen. Can you yes, great. Okay, then move forward. And then at that point, you're kind of hitting the milestones and you're meeting those expectations and everybody's happy.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Being transparent, asking, do you understand? Do you agree? Does this work? And kind of overachieving what you're promising is what I like to do. If, rendering is going to be done in 2 weeks, I like to have it done in a week, but tell the client, this is a worst case
Yep.
scenario type of thing. Could you briefly explain, because I tell clients this myself all the time, is you have
Mhm.
in your house that you can tap into to potentially have a cottage, an investment property, something else. Could you explain how owning a home is also a way that you can use that money to invest in more properties?
Sorry, I'm just looking around trying to find where that money is in my house. But
Ah,
that's a great question. That is a fantastic question. It's literally just like that. Like I am looking around being a little bit funny here, but what it is, it's when you're buying a home, what happens is just kind of it's a constant by time, right? Like this is a derivative of time. And as we go and you're paying the mortgage down, your house is appreciating,
yeah,
you're paying it down. Now you're building a lump sum of money, which we call equity. And anytime you're kind of, you want to tap into that equity, it's really just as simple as going back to the bank and say, hey, I'd love to refinance my house. Mind you, I don't, not everybody has to do that. Not everybody should do that because sometimes there's penalties and things like that. So just be aware of it. And you check with them, and most likely, more often than not, they'll find a good 50,000, 100,000 of equity that's been built up over 3, 4, 5 years. And the more you go, because it is a function of time, the more you go, the more equity that you have. In fact, I'm glad that you brought this up. I had a client of mine, I'm not going to mention names there. They've had close to about $300,000 worth of equity in their home. That was 2 years ago. Today, they are sitting on the one house they own and then four other rentals that we purchased for them that
amazing,
they're now making cash flow out of it.
amazing.
So it's just that all it takes is just a quick conversation with a realtor that does this quite often, because investment, just like we do first time home buyers, my specialty with the business side is a lot of investments. In fact, actually, I invite everybody that's going to watch this. I have a webinar actually on the 18th. If you guys want to dig into that, I would love to give you more about that. It's all about investments and being able to use the cash that you have or the finance that you have, or even the equity that you have, whether it's in your business or in your home, and then put it towards other avenues that could actually result in cash flow for you. And the idea is to get 5 to 10 to 15 homes that you're sitting down, and then by the time you're 50, 55, that's freedom 55 for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to have you back and touch in on specific topics that we can expand on in the future.
Absolutely.
But how do people get a hold of you? Tell us about your podcast, phone number, all of that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for asking. And obviously, as you can see, we've been friends for what, 22 years, maybe you and
Love
I. It's we're dating ourselves,
so,
guys. Don't
so much.
she's only 25. I've known her since 4 years old, but
Yeah, yeah, I
who's
know.
counting? Um, you can absolutely reach me at Canada on the Rocks. That's my podcast. It's on YouTube. My Instagram, it's agent_Fady K. Same as Facebook page. My phone number is very simple, 613-793 Fady with a Y, Fady. So that's actually 613-793-3239. But also my website is Khudair.ca. So anything that you need, drop me a line. My email is just my first at my last.ca. I can answer questions. I'm very accessible. A text is probably the fastest way to get a hold of me. And if I'm not on text, email, my assistant will hopefully answer that. But just give me a little bit of time. I'll get back to you. And normally within about 24 hours, we'll get back to you and then kind of get you situated.
You,
There's no such thing as a bad question when it comes to real estate, except the one that you do not ask.
I
That
agree.
one question that you do not ask could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And that's in most fields. I find questions are a wonderful thing. Worst thing is you already knew the answer and you're confirming,
Yeah,
but you're getting clarity. So it's better to over ask, be sure that you know that you're with the right guy, that he's knowledgeable, she's knowledgeable, and you're doing the right thing. This is, as mentioned, one of the largest purchases we make in life.
yeah.
So you should
And
be very informed and very comfortable with who you're working with.
you
Well,
got it. And 100%, like for me, one of the things that I pride myself and my team on is the fact that every now and then we'll hear a client saying, "You repeated this like 3 times." I know this is because this is going to cost you money if I don't repeat it. And if I don't repeat it and it doesn't stick up here, guess who's going to later on get it stick up to them? It's going to be you. It's cash going away from your pocket. So I'm going to do everything that it takes to make sure that you don't lose.
I agree 1,000%. Thank you so much for being on Ottawa Designers, and we will have
Thank you.
you back 100%. I'm probably going to look into your webinar myself just to see what's going on. Thank you
No,
so much.
really, really appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a good one.